Hello then, hiya. So glad to be here today with you all. Thanks to Jacek Migdał for asking if I'd like to talk out here today. So I think it's massive to have an LLMday here in Warsaw. And I hope this is just the MVP because this era is just beginning. But, well, let's get into things. Hello, I'm Michael, or I also go by Michał if you want. And I've been playing with LLMs for a while, since GPT-3 days. And I've been an early engineer at PostHog, where we've been building a bunch of pretty useful tools for developers. So maybe you've heard of us, maybe you haven't, and just in case not, then that is the whole bunch of things we do. So we offer all sorts of analytics and rollout tools all in one. And the aim at the end of the day is to help you understand, help developers all over the world understand how people use their product, and so that you can ship a successful product. So it is about understanding fundamentally, and that is a lot of work, right? So let's say you want to help people out with this and accelerate their workflows. I threw together our very, very first implementation of having any sort of AI or an LLM-based flow in our app 3.5 years ago, which is pretty crazy. And SQL querying made for a pretty great demo back then. So you have a single text input, have a think button, and then at the end you get some SQL out right. Made for a great demo. It was absolutely crap and useless in actually real-world scenarios. And so 2.5 years later, things have changed a little bit, and we've just launched a whole AI-based interface for our whole previously absolutely not AI-based application. And so it is, I think, it's been an extremely interesting thing to build. And so you might go, oh, you have only built this because the shareholders want you to have AI on your homepage. Yes, absolutely. But also because it's generally useful. And in this time, so far we've processed almost 1 million user messages. So nowhere near ChatGPT scale, but each one is a very high value task being done in terms of data analysis, data engineering, or setting up something in terms of understanding how people use their product. So this gap between the MVP and a paid product now, paid Agentic AI product, has been 2.5 years, more or less. And so what happened during the time? That's a lot of time, right? Today I want to talk about 10 takes from launching an Agentic product like this. So maybe some cold takes, maybe a hot take somewhere in there. Let's see. And so we've made a lot of mistakes. So this talk is generally about mistakes, and I think some threads will actually track very well with what Kuba was saying. But ultimately, the most important thing has been that I've been kind of skeptical of AI in the beginning, of LLMs, in terms of actually being useful. And so with every model being released, I thought it is slightly better, right? We are seeing some improvement. And this is a bit deceptive because at the end of the day, at the end of the year, 2 years ago, 2 years later, the model improvements have been absolutely critical to actually building something that's useful. And so this train is not stopping. I think there is a kind of tendency to go, oh, the scaling era is over now. It's only 1% gains. But we can see that that's also not true. And the time that for which the LLMs can now work independently with Opus 4.6 is massively longer than it was with Sonnet 4.5 just some months ago. And so this really is something that I think you have to have in the back of your head. But what does this actually mean? So what we started out with just a year ago, our whole flow of a user asking a question, how does usage of feature X correlate with usage of feature Y, this was a workflow. And so there's really two main models that you can go for with LLM-based applications. You have mostly a workflow, and so it will be a chart like this, where you always go through, say, a routing step. Usually, if you have a router step, that's a pretty telltale sign that you've got a workflow, and it's going to be pretty rigid. You're going to then go, oh yeah, I should go through this path. So say, maybe this is a funnel, so I'll first plan a funnel query, which is what we did, and then we generate a funnel query from the funnel plan. And then you have the result that you summarize. So much like the SQL example where when we had a single LLM call, this is a recipe for failure. And when anything goes wrong, or just the data is not available, the results have been pretty crap. But this was necessary with GPT-4o, GPT-4.1. And you really have to go for loops. And so there is this really clean definition of an agent these days, which is that an agent is basically an LLM in a loop. And this is so simple, and this is extremely magical. So this is why Claude Code is so successful. And this single change of completely discarding the notion of we know what the flow should be for the LLM, we just should give it tools. That is absolutely necessary to have anything useful that can do actual work. Even if it's more expensive, certainly. And the key thing is defaulting to a flat loop. So in this example right here, the biggest problem is if you have a funnel generator step or really any kind of sub-agent you delegate to, the issue we've seen over and over again is if we have a different chat history for it, different history messages, completely different system prompts at the very beginning, then it's like you delegating a not really complete task to another junior person on your team. And you're playing a game, the LLMs are playing a game of telephone. And simply accumulating all the context in one maybe very long thread completely changes the game in terms of actually doing work that might take minutes, but it's going to get done, as opposed to the details getting lost. To-dos. To-dos they look pretty cool, and they actually do work. So this single change in terms of just having one more tool that I think you really is a mandatory tool we have right now in any sort of agent is to have to-do write or write a task. You can do it to a file. You have to keep track of what is the next step or the high priority list of things for the agent to do next. And the self-organization then comes pretty automatically. So it's a beautiful kind of emergent behavior. And that you can then show it to the user is just a bonus. So we've had really good feedback. I can now see what is the plan for this, maybe more complex task. But the thing is, it actually gets done. The LLM doesn't get lost. Now, Claude Code's actually doing tasks in files now to be able to pick up the tasks in a different thread. But that's kind of more of an optimization if you're really going for a very robust workflow locally, for instance. But I think the big thing has been that, a big realization has been that it is all context retrieval. So every tool that you have is really about retrieving context in some way. You might have tools to create some things, you might have tools to take action, but if they aren't able to retrieve the relevant context, that is obviously useless. And my take is there's 3 of these pillars that you should think of. And if you skip one, you can, but you're not going to actually make an agent that is as useful as it could be. So say a user asks something really ambiguous, like they have this weird acronym. There's 4 things you can do. You can have an exploration tool or a set that will help you that the agent can try. And so you'll see this with Claude Code doing grep. If you have anything data related, run SQL is the superpower. Run SQL gets you every kind of data, really. You might want to actually have that in your core context. And so, again, Claude Code, really good example. A kind of claude.md file is useful for any sort of agent too. Even living on the cloud, doing nothing coding related. You want to have some kind of context included all the time. And then there is memory. And memory is tricky. It's very cool. But really is one of the not very well solved problems right now. But you can query your past threads with semantic search maybe. And then you can always ask the user, right? But if you do have to do that, then the metric of doing the task independently for hours, that just falls to maybe a minute if you have to ask the user a minute in about something that you could fetch in an automated way. So exploration tools, we've went through a few iterations of this, and so we've had some very specific ones, like read the specific kind of resource in the project, which would be like saved chart, read the specific saved chart. But what works really well is pure SQL. And it's really hard to beat what is already in the LLM's training data set. And it's seen insane amounts of SQL. And it's seen just 1 or 2 or 3 examples of your tool that you've given it. So if you can do something like SQL or code, then that is most likely going to work better from our evaluations. /init is a very powerful pattern. And that's the real biggest problem with onboarding a new user of our agent onto the platform is, even if maybe you've got data in the platform in terms of analytics, you don't really, the system doesn't have any info on what that all means. And sure, that's a problem for people too. So like if you have an organization of 20 people, for sure there are some things that your colleague knows that you don't in terms of the data that you're tracking. But the cool thing is if you have a search step that automatically tries to pull together all the relevant info and just prepare that core context to include them in every task, you can onboard someone in a couple minutes without them having to go ask anyone else, without having to make any organizational changes. And when you can have an individual on board to your tool, like any tool really, any SaaS and any agent too, individually without having to go to someone else, this massively increases adoption and actually being able to use this. So we built /init. We copied from Claude Code again. And so what it does is it searches the internet for what your product is. And we use the data we've got on what domains you're tracking with PostHog. So then with search now publicly available in OpenAI or Claude APIs, and very good since maybe, I'd say like June last year, this is really smooth. So I can recommend this, but then you've finally got memory. And there's a few ways of going about it. The major services mostly do semantic search on conversations. So if you go to Claude, I believe that's pretty much all it does. It works. It requires definitely more infra. And there's a lot of competing approaches right now between compressing the memories as new information comes in with the LLM versus just retrieving it later. And I'm super curious if anyone here has actually worked on this topic more, because one of the more unsolved problems, I think, right now that can unlock a lot of value. Well, so say we've got all the context, the job is being done, number one feedback that we've got initially, I have no idea what's happening. So actually showing every step of the agent's journey is pretty tough. The more tools you've got, the more ways of displaying what's happening you've got to invent, the more complex the data that you'd like to show is, the more front-end too. And then there's the streaming. So you want to stream the data, and this was really the biggest infra investment. But when you have an agent that has just a thinking message for a longer while and only shows you the steps maybe even once it's done, you can control the agent while it's working, and you have much more confidence in terms of it actually doing what you intended it to. So we've had to invest a lot in actually showing every single step. So if you click into the tool, every tool, you can see what is happening. You can see what the tool was, what the arguments were, and you see all the thinking as it streams in, which seems very table stakes because ChatGPT and Claude have got it. But it's quite a lot of work to actually pull off reliably in a distributed way. If you refresh the page, you still, you get the whole stream, but you can't really skip it. And frameworks. I kind of hate some of them. Not all. I fucking hate LangGraph, don't use LangGraph. So there are upsides and downsides. We migrated from the pure OpenAI SDK almost immediately because LangChain and LangGraph were the coolest and sort of most robust ways of orchestrating an LLM just a bit over a year ago. And today I absolutely wouldn't recommend that. So because this landscape evolves so fast, LangChain is really clunky right now, and not a great developer experience. LangGraph is the worst because it forces you into a specific way of thinking about, well, in this case, that your LLM agent is a state machine, and this will lock you into some choices pretty hard in terms of just the code that you've shipped and the way you're storing the conversation states. So use something lightweight, I would say. Pydantic AI is pretty solid. And the Vercel AI SDK doesn't force you to commit too much. So that's the kind of level, that's the most I'd look at, and invent the harness yourself. That's my opinion. But then you've shipped the thing and you want to make sure it actually works. Tough. Very tough, turns out. And some have said evals are all you need. I would not agree with that. I think evals are very cool, great fun. They allow you to iterate on very specific problems very fast, especially now that you can throw a coding agent at a set of evals and say iterate on the parameters. But at the end of the day, despite having a pretty good set of synthetic evaluation cases, we shipped the thing out to users and we found it's pretty crap and doesn't actually do what the user asked it to because we didn't know what they were going to ask for. And reality has way more details than you think at first. And this is all revealed, especially with agents, as they take some unusual choices to perform tasks. So what we've instituted is Trace our kind of meeting every week where we look through dozens or hundreds, if we can, of production traces of people using our PostHog AI agent. And that is extremely revealing. So all you need is some first users. And a realization from our very recent period is I think you have to work with the ecosystem. And there was really no ecosystem a year ago in terms of tools, in terms of agents, how agents communicate with other services. And with model context protocol, it seems like we're onto something, right? And this very much depends on what it is you're building. And if you're purely an AI agent layer, then the AI agent is all you've got. And I think you're maybe screwed too, as Claude and OpenAI move into more product spaces. But if you own the data layer, you kind of have a choice between shipping your own thing and saying just use what we've got, or saying, yeah, we've got our own thing, use it in our platform, but also we integrate with your flow in Claude Code, let's say, or whatever tool that supports the MCP, MCP. So what we've seen is our MCP server has took off massively, and using the same building blocks as our built-in AI agent, and the MCP server is actually more successful now than our Agentic AI product in terms of pure usage. Because, yeah, people use their tools where they already have their workflow. And so right now, this is a lot of Claude Code, for instance. And, so we spend a lot of time building something that's very cool. A lot of people use it, but then the MCP server just takes off. And I'm not actually jaded about it in any way, because this means that all the data that lives in our data platform is more meaningful and gets more usage. So as long as OpenAI or Anthropic don't try to take over that layer, that is a win for us as a data platform, or you if you're that data platform. And lastly, my last point for today is, I think there is a chart, maybe the most important chart right now in the world. So this is Claude Code GitHub commits over time, and this is very, very recent. So this chart is from just a few days ago. And I think this is the most revealing chart of our time right now. And so I mean like this month, because there will be a new one next month. Practically no commits were offered by Claude Code 8 months ago. 4 months ago, I think this was 0.5% of public commits on GitHub. 1 month ago, 2%, and today, over 4% of commits in public GitHub repos on GitHub are committed by Claude Code and publicly offered, because way more code is being written by this AI agent and others. So it seems like our workflows are changing massively right now, and code is where the forefront of the change is. So my take is, and this should be number 10, because I inverted the numbers, but number 10 is everything is code, and code is everything. As I kind of alluded, SQL is a kind of code, and so querying data, that's basically coding. Running ad hoc calculations, LMs are maybe not something you trust for math. If you have Python, you can do absolutely anything. Configuring any sort of visualization, maybe even writing mini web apps to visualize something. That is writing code, writing helper scripts, and then when you have access to an organization's repository of code, you have the source of truth for, their whole product, a lot of the way they work. And so what we're doing now, and hoping to ship this month, is we've, again, for I think the 4th time, completely rebuilt the PostHog AI agent in PostHog Cloud to be based on a coding sandbox built on model. And so it then has access to your code and is able to run Python. And I think that is probably where our industry is headed now, is it all runs in coding sandboxes and codes everything. So this is it from me for today. Thank you. Now, I have one last thing. You've seen this guy here. This is trivia. You will get this guy if you tell me, or closest to the correct number for how many hedgehogs there were in this presentation, as every single slide contained at least one. 24. Oh, some pretty close numbers. I think someone there said 25 first. 25. Now I think that direction was first, and the correct answer is 26 hedgehogs in this presentation. 26.
Congrats. Thank you, Michael. And anyone has some questions? Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. So I wanted to ask about data limitations for your agents. Like, in my experience, if I tell Claude Code not to search for something in this specific folder, he will go and try to search something in this specific folder. So what is the PostHog approach for storing users' data? Because like you're giving a SQL access, you're giving grep access to your Claude Code agents or GPT-4 agents or whatever agents, right? Does it mean that all the organizational data is stored in one like isolated container and you can go and find data from other organizations? Or do you have some sort of harnesses to prevent your agents to go outside of the like allowed scope?
So I think you have to have very good APIs. So I think there's two parts to your question. There's the data and there's the code, right? So the data, so we have SQL access and we're not a database. We are not Postgres kind of service. We built on top of basically Postgres or ClickHouse. And so what we've built is our own variant of SQL and our own layer that translates our SQL to safe and validated SQL that actually runs on the database. And we didn't know this was going to be used for AI-made queries because no LLM agents existed like really 3 years ago when we shipped that. But now this is paying lots of dividend because we can very safely and in a very controlled way allow any agent to query basically whatever and have access controls in our SQL translation layer. But for code, yeah, every organization gets its own sandbox. So there is, I also don't think this is something you should build. There's lots of good providers like model.com, and you should use that, and they do that job very well of isolating everything.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi. I've been using the PostHog MCP for a while, and I must say that it's a very good tool and very useful. And I was wondering why this interface that you provided on the like AI PostHog, why was it worse than MCP? If you can, I mean, as I imagine it, use the same MCP underneath and just pretending that you have something different.
So I think the thing is that it is better. What we've built in a very tailored way for our app is better, but people are doing this work, using PostHog data in other workflows, like in Claude Code or Claude and on the web. And so even though the MCP server is actually not as polished, it gets way more usage. So I think it goes to show that having the best product is not the most important thing. It's also important that it's where the user is. So if you're using the MCP server, then you're probably an example of it.
Thanks for presentation using PostHog as well. 2 questions, quick one. Did you open the agent to the world, so where you can use the behavioral data from inside and compare it to the environmental data of like competition, etc., and emerge with some interesting results? And the second question, you've mentioned that at the end that now you're building this new iteration where the agent will have access to the user's code. After all, you're operating a heavily regulated environment with PA data and so on and so on. So what's your take on making this secure, and the agent has the access to the insights of the analytical data versus having access to the code for suggesting iterations and so on?
So definitely no shipping of PRs without approval yet, but access to the data. It's a tricky problem. We are very clear that this has access to all your data. We currently, in the sort of classic approach we've had before decoding Sandbox, we've not exposed any read external URLs tool because of safety. And for decoding Sandbox approach, we're also limiting what the URLs and domains that can be accessed from the Sandbox. So that, yeah, a bad prompt can't exfiltrate this so easily. And definitely what we see is people in Europe are more risk averse to adopt it. So people from Germany will ask you, what's the data? What's going to happen with data? Much more than people in San Francisco. And right now, yeah, it's something we're clear that this is an LLM that is a bit of a wild card. So it's a mix of things.
All right, so thank you, Michael, and thank you for the questions. We're heading into the coffee break, and at 10:30, we're going to be back for our next speaker, right? Thank you.
Thank you, and see you at Pączki by PostHog.